Welcome to my next weapon build guide. This time we focus on TEC-9 Additional Rules. As you can see, this weapon is very flexible and can deal high single target damage or area damage depending on your needs. As always, feel free to join my Once Human Discord, and let's start with the weapon features explanation. Additional Rules is a Fortress Warfare keyword weapon. Hitting a target triggers Fortress Warfare with a cooldown of 10 seconds. The main feature of this weapon is that after using a Deviation skill, bullets deal 120% of attack as elemental status damage, and the type depends on the deviation. Switching weapons removes this effect. At the moment we have 3 different elemental deviations. Blaze, which includes Pyro Dino and Invincible Sun. Frost, with Polar Jelly and Snowsprite. And lastly Shock, which only has Zapamander. For those who don't know, Shattered Maiden is no longer an elemental type deviation. She used to be an explosion elemental damage deviation, but now she doesn't scale with it. That's why we can only use 3 elemental types, not 4 like we have in the game. I hope it will change in the future. It would be fun to see explosions on each shot. The next weapon feature is that reloading an empty magazine restores 25% of magazine capacity as deviant power, up to a maximum of 20 points per reload. Lastly, while in Fortress Warfare, you gain plus 15% crit rate. Now quickly about the Fortress Warfare keyword. It's an area of effect buff in a 2-meter radius that grants allies super armor with a 20% weapon damage bonus. Super armor gives protection against crowd control. Since this weapon is a bit complicated, first I will cover the default build, and at the end, you will find area of effect damage and crit elemental optimized builds with small differences pointed out. For the main weapon, use assault-style calibration with elemental damage. You need to focus on both stats. Weapon damage from calibration translates to base attack. As mentioned before, the weapon deals 120% of attack as elemental status damage depending on the deviation. Elemental damage is equally important, as it increases both your damage and your deviations. Aim for at least 48% weapon damage and 18% elemental damage on your calibration. The calibration effect boosts your attack by 20%, which easily compensates for losing 25% magazine capacity and 50% accuracy. For accessories, focus on accuracy, since it will be very low with this calibration. I use multi-break, compact reflex sight, tactical laser sight, and weighted SMG mag. For ammo, use the best you can afford. Tungsten ammo is the best option because it increases attack and psi intensity. Use it outside silos, in open-world content, and in monoliths. Inside silos, use suppression or penetration ammo depending on the enemy type. Developers plan to streamline bullet types in April, but for now, use what I recommend. It's worth mentioning that your enhanced bullet damage scales with weapon range, even if you deal elemental damage. If you are fighting enemies farther than 25 meters, which is your base weapon range, consider using a tactical suppressor for an extra 20% effective firing range. To check the distance to your enemy, press your mouse wheel. It will mark the enemy. For the secondary weapon, the best choice is Recurve Crossbow. It marks enemies with the Bullseye debuff. By default, it applies 8% vulnerability for 12 seconds. This increases damage from all sources on the marked target. You also gain 15% crit rate against targets from its weapon feature. Even though we are not building much crit rate in the default setup, it is still the best choice. For melee weapon, use a Kukri. It grants a damage and crit rate boost after defeating an enemy with a heavy attack. Unfortunately, you cannot craft this weapon. It drops randomly, with the highest chance in Nightmare content. For armor, use 3 pieces of the Savior set. This is essential for generating shields. Shields improve both survivability and damage. As filler, use 2 Dark Resonance pieces for extra damage when Deviant power is not full, and an extra 10% shield after using the Deviation ultimate skill. The final gear piece is Cowboy Boots. This is the key component. While in Fortress Warfare, you gain plus 25% attack, which massively boosts your damage potential. For skins, I use a setup focused on damage and mobility. It maximizes stamina and enables the Soaring Leap buff, which increases weak spot damage by 20% while mid-air. For the mask skin, use Lunar Rabbit Fur for 10% elemental damage while your HP is low. For Deviation, you have 5 strong options. Remember that you deal the same type of elemental damage as your Deviation, starting with Frost elemental damage. Polar Jelly Ultimate deals one of the highest damage outputs in the game, and its secondary ability offers very high burst potential. The problem is low range and the fact that it does not move. Against moving targets, or when Jelly cannot reach, Snowsprite is a much better option. This Deviation deals a lot of damage while being able to attack enemies like Manabus, which most Deviations cannot reach. For Blaze Element, Invincible Sun offers the highest damage potential. Its ultimate deals massive area of effect damage, and the secondary ability deals high damage while giving you a shield. The second option for Blaze is Pyro Dino. Compared to Invincible Sun, the only advantage is range, similarly to Snowsprite. The ultimate ability is not very useful because you cannot deal damage yourself while holding Dino, and you cannot take advantage of the explosion effect when burn is applied. Another issue is that when you grab Dino, you lose your ability to deal elemental damage with bullets. The secondary ability deals high area of effect blaze damage. Lastly, Shock Elemental Deviation, Zapamander. When summoned, it deals high damage and nullifies target shields, which makes it very strong in silos where enemies are often shielded. Its secondary ability boosts your movement speed for 8 seconds while dealing low damage to nearby units. Here is a small trick that will make your gameplay smoother. Most Deviation abilities can be used while dashing with Arrow Leap Whim. You can summon Deviations or use their secondary abilities without animation. Moving on to food buffs. I use Layered Galaxy for extra elemental damage, while Midair and Mixed Fried Hot Dog for extra damage against targets marked with Bullseye. For drinks, I use Whimsical Drink to boost status damage and Borscht Deluxe mainly for its meat effect. If you deal power surge damage, use Sparkling Pumpkin Soup instead of Borscht, as it offers a better damage boost. You want to cook all your food buffs, including Bland Dish, with deer meat if you are marking enemies. If not, use meat depending on your elemental damage. Beef for Frost, Crocodile for Power Surge, or Goat for Burn. Additionally, if you are not marking enemies or you are clearing large groups, use Surprise Spring Roll instead of Hot Dog for extra elemental damage. To use more than one food or drink buff at the same time, you need to be Chef class. If you are Chef class, you can also cook your Bland Dish with peanuts instead of sugar, which boosts the meat effect by 50%. Now moving on to Cradle Override. Keep in mind that different servers may have different options. I am recording this on the Endless Dream scenario. You will need Anti-Phase for extra SMG damage and bonus damage against phase anomalies. Status Enhancement is another strong option, giving 15% status damage when hitting weak spots. Deviant Energy Defense is also essential. It provides an extra 30% shield when summoning a Deviation. Shield protection is good for both offense and defense. You gain 10% extra damage and damage reduction against deviants when your shield is above 40% HP. Elemental Sense boosts your elemental keyword damage by 25% depending on your damage type. Steady Hand increases weak spot damage by 25% while in Fortress Warfare. The next choice depends on your elemental type. If you deal frost damage, go for Extreme Freezing. It increases Frost Vortex damage up to 25%. It also applies a stacking 3% slow on deviants up to 10 stacks and freezes them at full stacks. If you deal burn damage, choose Blazing Detonation, which increases burn damage by 25%. The issue is that you cannot apply burn yourself, so you must rely on Invincible Sun for this bonus. Pyro Dino cannot apply burn, so if you plan to use it, you will need another option. The same applies to Transient Impact. This cradle does not give you any damage boost in the default setup, so unless you are using a Power Surge weapon, you cannot benefit from it. This might be a bug, and could be fixed in the future. If you cannot apply burn or Power Surge, you have 2 free slots and 1 if you use Frost. Good options are Heavy Strike for increased Fortress Warfare range, Marked Strike if you mark enemies for extra weak spot damage, and Resilience if you need more survivability. Now the most important and most complex part, mods. Additional Rules scales well with many bonuses depending on the deviation, making it extremely flexible. For mod attributes, prioritize damage against the enemies you fight, elemental damage, status damage, weak spot damage, and keyword damage depending on your deviation. Balance your stats carefully, as the game has diminishing returns. The more you invest into one stat, the less value you get. Suffix choice is less important. Even if I recommend Lunar Suffix, do not use it if it is level 9 and you have a Deviant Energy suffix at a much higher level. Always prioritize higher level or enhancement if you are using the old mod system. Each player has access to different mods, so decide based on your situation. Starting with weapon mods, you have a few good choices. For Blaze Element and situations where you need Fortress Warfare longer than 5 seconds, use Durable Territory. Every hit while in Fortress Warfare extends the buff by 1 second up to 5 extra seconds. With this mod, you can maintain Fortress Warfare almost permanently if you're not moving too much. If you are moving, Portable Territory is a better option, as the buff remains for 2 seconds after leaving the area. For Frost, I recommend Cryo Catalyst. It boosts Frost Vortex damage by 10%, and if you use Snowsprite, you get an extra 5% because it can create ice crystals. For Shock, use Static Shock for an easy 20% power surge damage boost. I recommend using keyword suffix on all weapon mods for maximum damage. For the secondary weapon, use Vulnerability Amplifier. It adds an 8% vulnerability debuff. I recommend using Bullseye suffix to extend its duration. For the mask, use either Light Cannon or Unbreakable depending on your playstyle or mod level. Both give 15% attack. I recommend Fortress Warfare suffix. For the helmet, use Deviation Expert. It gives extra fire rate and status damage. The negative range does not affect your damage in practice. I recommend Crescent Deviant Energy suffix. For the chest, use Rejuvenating. It heals you after defeating an enemy if your shield is above 30% HP. If your HP is full or sanity is low, excess healing converts into a shield, lasting 20 seconds. I recommend Lunar Deviant Energy suffix. For pants, you have several options. Elemental Resonance is useful if you lack elemental damage, stacking up to 24 times. Distance Strike offers the highest damage boost if the enemy is at least 20 meters away and you can hit weak spots. It gives 20% weak spot damage beyond 20 meters, plus 1% per additional meter up to 20. Reload Rampage is great for clearing groups. It reloads 2 bullets after each kill and gives 10% status damage until the next reload. I recommend Resonance suffix. For shoes, use Rush Hour. It gives the highest damage boost. You gain 4% status damage for every 10% HP lost. I recommend Phantasmal Deviant Energy suffix. For gloves, choose based on your stats. Elemental Overload gives 18% elemental damage. Flame Resonance gives 20% status damage. Weak Spot Boost gives 25% weak spot damage. I recommend Crescent Deviant Energy suffix. Now, a small modification for area of effect damage. Use this preset only with Invincible Sun when clearing silos or Endless Dream content. Your personal damage will be lower, but your deviation will be much stronger. First, change your unique gear piece to Barbecue Gloves. Then change 2 mods on your weapon and mask. For weapon, use Flame Resonance for 2 extra burn stacks. For mask, use Blaze Amplifier to boost Psi Intensity. This does not increase your damage directly, but your deviations scale with it. For both, use Burn suffix. For crit elemental setup, start with weapon calibration. Use crit rate instead of elemental damage. Then use crit boost on gloves for an extra 15% crit rate. Change your suffix priority on gloves and pants to Resonance Deviant Energy for extra crit and elemental damage. With this setup, when using Kukri and Crossbow, you reach around 85% crit rate. I do not recommend using Gas Mask Hood with Corrosion Shotgun. By the time you set it up, most fights are already over. It also feels clunky, and the damage difference is not significant. Using Corrosion as secondary makes you lose important multipliers like attack boost, vulnerability on marked targets, and damage against enemies with bullseye. In the end, test what works best for you. I hope you enjoyed this build guide. If you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content.